Thank you so much for having me. Um, Excited to get involved with the Santa Clara County Association of Realtors. We've seen a ton of demand and interest in ADU development in Santa Clara County and in the greater Bay Area. And I think generally the general public is a bit behind the curve. And we've seen a lot of interest from realtors, agents, and brokers in helping customers get more in front of the curve. So this will largely be an informative webinar on what ADUs are, how they work, permitting process, types of ADUs that are out there. We'll also cover Habitat, my company, a bit as well, which is a sort of turnkey provider of detached ADUs for investors and single-family homeowners throughout California and the Bay Area. Feel free to ask questions in the Q&A or the chat. And Jody should help us at the end. We'll have a section for Q&A where we can answer individual questions live or from the chat. But for now, I'll just sort of talk through our slides here, cover background on ADUs, how they work, and what you can do to help clients. So as an agenda, we'll start with some of the new laws that were passed, what opportunities have now presented themselves, what ADUs are, why they're important. We'll also dive in a little bit to different types of ADUs that exist, cover Habitat specifically in our ADUs and what our process is, how it's different, and then have sort of key takeaways and Q&A. The big message that I want to get across to everyone today is that there's currently a pretty massive arbitrage opportunity certainly with single family housing, but I'd argue any housing that has a large lot in California. Effectively, the state of California has ended single family zoning for the most part, across the board, hard stop, period. Every single family home in California is now a duplex or a triplex. The market has not caught on to that fact. Everyone on this webinar is now ahead of the curve and can present this opportunity to clients, investors, or on personal properties as a way to add additional value to a home that either was purchased or could be purchased and acquired for dramatically below what its future value will be, either because we're adding space for family, additional square footage and livable space, or an additional unit that could be rented for rental income. This is basically brand new law that went into effect Jan 1 of 2020. General market has absolutely not caught on yet. And homes are, for the most part, selling for what they used to sell for, adjusted for any macroeconomic trends. But every property with the space can now add a detached unit with 1,000, 1,200 square feet, or a junior ADU in addition. So first off, what is an ADU? There's actually a fair amount of confusion about this. ADU is a very broad term. It stands for accessory dwelling unit. And historically, these units have gone by many names: granny flats, granny units, a second unit, second home, a casita, a guest house. I've heard garden house, carriage house, tons of different names. But effectively, this is a unit that is an accessory to a primary residence, whether that's single family or multifamily. And it can be used for either expanding family, maybe a grandparent coming home or a kid coming home from college, or it can be used for rental income for a tenant. Optionally, it can have its own separate address or not. Similarly, optionally, it can have its own separate utilities and meter or not. It's usually in some way tied to the primary residence, and it is often, but not necessarily, much smaller than the primary residence. Technically, they can range from very small, like 225, 250 square feet, all the way up to 1,200 square feet for some of our larger 2 or 3 bedroom units. And provides a ton of flexibility and optionality on a property while adding legal, livable, permitted square footage. Some of the major categories of ADUs that exist, there are detached ADUs, which is what Habitat specializes in, something like you'd see here in this photo. That is a standalone dwelling that's usually built in a side yard or backyard, separate from a primary residence. You also have conversion ADUs, which would be converting like a garage or an existing structure, or maybe a basement into an ADU. If you have detached, you of course can also have attached ADUs. And then there are also JDUs, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. JDUs are a bit less exciting from an investment perspective because they require occupancy in the primary, but those are less than 500 square feet and exist within the existing envelope. of the primary residence, must be attached. Why have you been hearing about ADUs a lot recently? Why now? What is the trend that is driving ADU permits up 4, 5, 10x in certain jurisdictions year over year? A lot of things happening in the world. The pandemic has created a big desire for people to think differently about their living space. Kids coming home from college, grandparents coming home to be closer to family and away from retirement communities means that there's a desire for additional, somewhat separate space close to family, but not necessarily in the same property. Also see a lot of demand for detached home offices in this sort of work from home era. And the big thing is that there are 5 new bills that all passed and went into effect January of this year, 2020, that really enabled ADU development, where previously local jurisdictions had very onerous and difficult permitting and building requirements that made it somewhat prohibitive to be able to build ADUs. Those have all been wiped away statewide, and that, coupled with historically low interest rates, has led to a surge in ADU demand and development. So what are these new laws, and what do they mean for you or for your customers and clients? These are statewide, and they supersede any local jurisdictions' rules around ADUs. They also supersede HOAs. So the first thing is we now have consistency at a state level of what the bare minimums are. Cities can still come in and create more favorable ADU treatment, but they cannot create any treatment that is less favorable than the statewide consistent guidelines. So by law, by right, every property is now allowed 1 junior ADU and 1 ADU per lot. So turning every single family home into a triplex effectively. Permitting has been dramatically simplified. So previously you had to go through a very onerous, complex, discretionary review process. Neighbors, HOAs were brought in, design review sessions. This is now a ministerial review. In fact, for the most part, it's not even supposed to go to the planning department. And it's just a rubber stamp if you meet the basic guidelines, and all permits must be approved within 60 days. So it's a fast, easy, and ministerial review process with the permitting department. Fees have been reduced. The ability for cities to require high-priced impact fees in order to build ADUs have gone away, as long as the ADU is under a certain size. Off-street parking requirements, for the most part, have been removed entirely, as long as you're within a half mile of some sort of public transit stop. Owner occupancy laws have a 5-year waiver, so you do not have to live in the property to get a permit and certificate of occupancy for an ADU, or to be able to rent both the primary and the ADU. Huge deal for investors, only active for 5 years, so need to get those ADUs built now if you plan to rent both the primary and the ADU. And setbacks have been standardized statewide to 4 feet from the rear and side property lines. Setbacks from the front or the primary still vary, but generally between 6 and 10 feet, depending on the local fire department. But all of these laws in aggregate have created an environment where everyone can be confident that they will very quickly and easily be allowed to be able to build an ADU without HOAs or cities stepping in and making the process more difficult or onerous. And to my broader point here, everyone on this call is very ahead of the curve. The market is mispriced right now. Single family homes with large lots are effectively zoned triplex. Yes, the ADUs still need to be built, but the value for these lots should be much higher. So it's a great time to buy single family property or multifamily property, or by law, you're allowed 2 detached ADUs before the market catches on and starts to value those properties at a higher price. So what are the major use cases for ADUs that we're seeing here at Habitat? The first is really guest house. A lot of opportunity for long-term guests, a home office, maybe an au pair or a live-in care provider, just additional sort of extended family space or space for the family. Similarly, you can think of that as sort of an in-law unit where you have kids coming home from college or grandparents coming home from a retirement community. And really anyone who needs additional space. We've had quite a few customers, just rather than doing a difficult to get permitted addition to their home, think I'd rather have that additional space and square footage on my property as an ADU. And It's easier to get permitted, faster to build, and it gives me the optionality of separating that from the primary and renting it separately if I ever need the extra income, which is our last use case here. I do want to go through the ROI on an ADU. This is a really complicated topic and not super well understood yet. But just to give you a sense of why we're seeing investors and people who are super ROI focused want to build detached ADUs at a really high rate. So the first thing, and this is worth memorizing if you are an agent, one of the things I think you can do to best add value for your clients is help them evaluate their own yards and their backyards for potential ADU. If you're working with a prospective buyer as well, you really want to make sure that if they plan to build an ADU, it's going to be feasible to do so in advance. So when I look for a tier 1 ADU site, this is what we look for. Speaking of detached ADUs specifically here, since those are the most difficult in terms of feasibility. So you're going to want a fair amount of backyard space, at least 20 feet wide by 50 feet long. That's to give enough room to allow for the 4-foot setback requirements from the rear and the side. And then the 10-foot primary home setback. Power lines are a really big deal, especially if you're doing prefab construction, which is what Habitat does, and generally one of the lower cost, simpler, most controlled ways to build a detached ADU. The reason power lines are important is that if you're building prefab, you're going to need to usually pick a unit up with a crane and ship it sort of up and over the house and deposit it onto a permanent foundation in the backyard. And you cannot crane for the most part over major power lines. So if they're directly in front of the home, or if they're directly over the backyard, that could be prohibitive unless you have a wide side yard or rear yard with access for about a 12 to 13 foot truck to be able to drive through and deliver a prefab home. Obviously, if you're not building prefab, the power lines issue is somewhat null and void. With stick-built construction, you're going to get a lot more flexibility. You're going to have a lot more sites that are feasible, but the costs are going to be 2 or 3x. Flat grading overall for all types of detached ADUs is less expensive to do. Foundations on a slope is just much more expensive. Retaining walls, stilting, those types of things. The more minimal the site prep, obviously the lower your costs will be for a customer. That means if we're doing an ADU closer to the primary residence, we have less trenching to run for the sewers, utilities, water, power. Less tree removal is a lot less expensive, less demolition of existing sheds. Things like that will just make an ADU easier and less expensive for customers. And then in terms of delivery for prefab, getting a unit there, if you're up on top of a mountain with narrow, windy roads, it can be difficult to get the unit there. So if you're assessing future properties, things with wide, straight streets closer to freeways generally are easier, simpler, and less expensive for customers. We're going to run through an example home here. This is sort of an anonymized customer, but from a real presentation and proposal we did. This is in Oakland on Oakville Avenue, building a Habitat 950. So this is a 950 square foot, 3-bedroom. The all-in development costs, including things like foundation, utilities, connections, permits, finishes, fixtures, delivery of the unit itself, install, all-in costs about $250,000 to be able to build this ADU, because this is very much a tier 1 site for us, super easy install and access, flat, minimal site prep. And we're going to be evaluating this for a property that's already owned by the investor. And that's really the key here. On land that's already owned, or a property that's already owned, you happen to also own this very expensive land in a desirable high rent area. And that can be leveraged because effectively you're getting the land for free. So to be able to build a low cost structure in an extremely expensive area on land you already own generally just creates arbitrage where you're pulling in a high cost structure for a low cost and generating the extremely high rents from the area. I extremely conservatively underwrote the rents here for $3,000 a month. Realistically, for a 3-bed in this part of Oakland, closer to $3,500. But we'll evaluate a few different ways to look at the returns. One of the easiest ways, I had an investor in Petaluma the other day tell me, I don't even need to run through the model because I know that to buy a 3-bedroom condo in the same area would cost me $500,000, $600,000. If I can just build that same 3-bed condo for $250,000, the replacement cost is just so much lower and I'm generating the exact same rents. So it's sort of a no-brainer from that perspective, just comparing purchasing a new 3-bedroom condo on the left to building a 3-bed ADU on land you already own, and getting geographic arbitrage on the prefab construction costs on the right. So same rents, but purchasing them for a massive discount relative to the alternatives. Let's dive into cap rates on this investment opportunity. So our all-in project costs, as mentioned before, is about $250,000 for a tier 1 property for this 3-bed model, one of our smaller 3-bed models. Gross rental income is going to be $3,000 a month. If we just look at the gross payback period, it's really like under 8 years, 7 years, which is phenomenal to get all of your money back. Just looking at gross, oversimplified, but phenomenal payback periods, get all your money back in under 10 years, unheard of in the Bay Area. To do the cap rate calculation, we'll subtract out our non-mortgage costs, monthly costs, so things like insurance, taxes, vacancy, management fees, left with our net operating income annualized divided by the total project cost, and we get a 10.68% cap rate. That is off the charts for the Bay Area. If you have investment opportunities that are coming in at 10, 11% cap rates consistently, please contact me. I'd love to invest. These rates are generally through the roof. Let's look at a more sophisticated model as well to understand why investors have gotten so excited and are starting to get out in front of the curve here. This is going to be the same thing as cap rate, but we'll do cash on cash returns, introducing financing to the equation. Financing is very complicated for ADUs. We have sort of an in-house financing process to help customers or agents work through their options, but it's still very much an evolving space. Financing innovation has lagged historically behind real estate innovation. We're seeing that here. But let's assume a super basic case here. Customer has a decent amount of equity. So we'll just do a cash out refi on the primary residence. And we'll only pull out 50% of the funds, which is probably very conservative. We've seen a lot of customers finance 100% of their ADU project. So we're going to finance 125K at, this is even a high interest rate for today, but again, just sort of underwriting conservatively. Same monthly rent, same unit. This time we'll also pull out these mortgage costs here, the principal and interest on the monthly basis, left with monthly net cash, dividing that by the unfinanced amount in the product, the equity required. We're getting cash on cash returns up in the 16% range, which is again off the charts. If you're consistently getting this in the Bay Area, please let me know. I'd love to invest. And if you're, I mean, we've seen a fair amount of customers get infinite cash on cash returns because they're financing 100% of the project. So really the financials here are amazing. And it's all built on the back of really expensive land in a high rent area that you happen to already own and can get geographic arbitrage to build a unit for much less expensive costs than buying a new unit on the market. Okay, so why is the market so behind? Why am I so bullish on this opportunity and think investors and homeowners haven't caught on and are still mispricing single family homes with large lots? Number of reasons. So first off, everyday consumers are buying homes for personal use, especially in the single family home space. Most of the buyers are not investors. If they were, and these were commercial properties or multifamily properties, the homes would be valued off purely income and cash flows, which would result in much higher prices because these ADUs rent for the same amount as the single family home down the street of the similar size. So that's reason one. Number two, obviously, if you're buying a single family home that doesn't have an ADU, you're not really getting the value of the use of the ADU yet. And most people don't want to become project managers or GCs on a major complex construction project. That is one of the major values and benefits Habitat brings. We are a turnkey provider of ADUs, complete project management. We're the GC of record. We control 100% of the project from A to Z, permits through foundation, utilities, trenching, and even all the finishes, fixtures, and warranty on our units. Another reason, just the market is unaware. I don't think people generally realize how pervasive and how powerful these new laws are. I was speaking with a private money lender who's a super experienced lender in the commercial multifamily space. individual investor, has been doing it for 20 years, is on the Berkeley ADU task force. And even he did not know that all of his multifamily properties were now eligible to build 2 detached ADUs with nothing the city of Berkeley could do to stop it. So until that awareness is built, these homes will continue to be underpriced, and there's a tremendous arbitrage opportunity there. The other thing is that comps are really difficult for appraisers these days. There aren't a ton of newly built detached ADUs that have also been sold, and thus there are a dearth of comps on the market, which means that even though the home probably should be valued, say at X, the appraiser might not have the rigorous statistical analysis available to value it at X and instead has to value it at Y. That's something we've seen hold down financing amounts, which we can talk through in more depth later as well. The other thing I really want to highlight is that there is a ticking clock on this from an investment standpoint. There is a 5-year waiver period where you do not have to have any owner occupancy in order to build and rent an ADU. After 5 years, that period might be extended, it might go away, it's not clear. But for any ADUs built over the next, say, 4.5 years and permitted, you will be forever grandfathered into the ability to not have to occupy but either the primary or the ADU. You can rent them both. J ADUs are different and less attractive, especially for investors, because not only are they smaller and sort of, in my opinion, awkwardly attached to the primary, they must have a door into the primary and they can share a kitchen, these types of things. But J ADUs can still require, and actually must still require under state law, owner occupancy in either the JDU or the primary. So less attractive in that way. But if you plan to live in the primary, it's still a great option. The other thing I want to flag for everyone is, like, this is not just an incredible investment opportunity or incredible opportunity for expanded space for family. This is really something that's good for the community. It's a sustainable investment. It's very environmentally conscious. It's something I think everyone can feel good about, helping to contribute to solving California's affordable housing crisis. Obviously, during the pandemic, it's helpful to have a detached home office. We also have seen a lot of societal benefits for the aging population, be able to move back home, be closer to family. Generally, there are all these incredible knock-on effects when families are closer together. Children's education goes up dramatically, accountability goes up dramatically. Commuting and commute time is knocked down when you're able to live closer to work for a more attainable, affordable home. And the reduction in commute not only helps the environment, but also helps families stay more cohesive. Also, just adding units in general helps create more supply, brings down rents, helps create just more housing, which in turn creates more affordable housing. And the other thing is that these additional sources of income can be phenomenal for helping people afford a home that otherwise would have been a bit out of reach. So what can you do as a realtor to help customers in different segments? I'm going to start with homeowners. I think this is the primary thing to think about as an agent. I'd focus first on people with existing land that they already own. The reason that's so compelling is that this is effectively free land they already own, and you're just a full step or two closer to being able to build an ADU. And there's a lot of demand, because of the reasons I mentioned before, to have additional space. So the first thing I would do is get yourself super educated on the opportunity, what the new laws do and how they gut and completely remove the ability for HOAs and cities to prevent ADU development. And also understand the different value propositions and use cases for different customer segments, whether they're an investor looking for returns or a family that needs additional space. You can also get yourself familiarized with any local nuances and resources. In Santa Clara County, for example, there's a great second unit center that's sort of sponsored and put on by the county that helps provide resources to homeowners looking to explore different types of ADUs. I'd also strongly recommend getting comfortable enough yourself assessing yards for potential feasibility. This could also be expanded to include assessing a home for or a garage for a conversion or an attached ADU. You could help a customer compare options between multiple ADU providers and types, whether that's stick-built or prefab. I'll have a comparison in a bit so you can get more comfortable with the different types of ADUs that exist and the different construction options. And then Additionally, if the customer is planning to turn it into a rental, there are some implications there in terms of becoming maybe a landlord for the first time. So just making sure they're educated on the landlord-tenant laws that are out there. But phenomenal tool for agents. I've seen a lot of agents include ADU information in like a monthly newsletter, just to make sure every homeowner is aware of the opportunity that they can help contribute to solving the California affordable housing crisis, and make sure that they position themselves well to build an ongoing value-add relationship with their clients. The next bucket is home buyers, fairly similar to homeowner. What would you do if you're working with a prospective home buyer and want to introduce ADUs into the equation? Well, it's really interesting for home buyers because they're in a great position to buy a property and then immediately add an ADU. And what this does is it unlocks for buyers who maybe need more space, a lower cost, smaller size set of target properties. So it expands their target portfolio of homes because they know that they'll be able to build an ADU after they buy. So you can help them target eligible properties for this type of opportunity and maybe get an even better return on their investment. So similarly, you want to get educated on the laws, the value props, the opportunities, similarly the local resources. It becomes incredibly critical to help a buyer do diligence on a property with a large yard for an ADU in advance. You would hate to buy a property only to find out that an ADU, in fact, could not be built there after all. Habitat is certainly very happy to help with that. If you have a prospective client and you're looking at homes, feel free to shoot me directly the address at any time, and we can do a quick punch up and just ensure it's feasible before you submit an offer or go through your inspection period or diligence period. And then similarly, help compare between options and understand the landlord-tenant laws. But this is all about unlocking new possibilities in a new portfolio of homes for potential buyers. And then home sellers, this is interesting and one I think I've seen a few agents sort of misunderstand. There's oftentimes a strong demand to get the home sort of show ready, right? You want to maybe upgrade the bathrooms or the kitchen, get it clean, maybe do some staging. I do not, under any circumstances at this point, recommend adding an ADU prior to selling a home. The reason for that is that the contributory value of the ADU on day one is a little bit uncertain. I mentioned before, there aren't enough comps on the market. And as a corollary, appraisers still come in like the next day with a wide range of values. So if it's not considered a value-add investment on day one, it's going to be something that the home seller really regrets adding. If you're planning to own the home for 5-10 years, I think all of those risks generally are mitigated substantially. Consumers will get more comfortable. There will be more comps. You'll easily get a strong return on your investment plus 5-10 years of usage and rental income. But if you plan to sell immediately, I would not add an ADU right now. What you can do though is market the potential for an ADU and get buyers that maybe otherwise weren't excited about the property, really excited about the property, either for more space for family or investment income. So I think that the key here is understand any home that you're listing for sale. What are its ADU possibilities? How do those new laws in California help empower those possibilities? And how can we get buyers excited about those possibilities? Similarly, you're going to want to get familiar with local nuances and resources. You're going to want to understand the feasibility for an ADU on a specific home that you're trying to list. And then for any buyers that come through the door for that home, help them compare their options and understand the differences between ADU providers and types. Hopefully that will help you increase demand for your property and its attractiveness. As mentioned before, there's a huge mispricing out there in my opinion. So it's a good idea to buy single family homes right now. And if you're selling them, you want to try to drive demand and price up by educating all buyers on the right and opportunity to build additional space and square footage through the ADU laws. Okay, I'll sort of dive through Habitat over the next 8 minutes, and then we'll have probably about 20 minutes at the end for Q&A. I do see a lot of questions coming in, and Jody should help me sort of run through these at the end. But Habitat is a turnkey provider and practitioner of only detached, only prefab ADUs. So I believe in ADUs as a mission. I'm obviously happy to answer questions or help educate clients on stick-built ADUs, attached ADUs, conversion ADUs, etc. But for the purposes of our business, it's detached prefab ADUs only. We're building to HUD code, manufactured home ADUs. There's some trade-offs with that approach, but among the major benefits, way less expensive, way easier building permitting process, way easier building inspection process, like the most convenient, simple, low-cost option out there. And then we're a well-funded venture-backed business based out of San Francisco. We've got 60 active projects throughout the greater Bay Area, and just this week actually expanded into SoCal as well. The turnkey aspect here is really important. We see a lot of customers get turned off from building ADUs because they don't want to become a manager over a really complex construction project. So we handle everything: permits, feasibility, design sessions with simple constraints for customers, the site prep, utilities trenching, the unit itself, the installation of that unit, the finishes, the fixtures, our units even come with washer dryers. And then they all come with a warranty as well. So for someone who's looking to simplify the process, that's us. What makes us different? We're going to be the lowest cost solution bar none. We can get the unit in the ground as quickly as possible to ensure that family can use it ASAP, or obviously time is money and getting better returns. And the process for us is as simple and turnkey and convenient as possible. So the first thing I'll do is I'll talk through price and kind of go through some of the trade-offs between different ADU options. I'm focused here on detached since that's our specialty. Generally, if you're doing a conversion ADU or an attached ADU, you sort of have to do this stick-built option. So the left column is stick-built, the middle column is sort of other prefab options, and the right column here is habitat. So stick-built means building on site, your typical hammer and nails, wood frame construction. Budgets are going to be through the roof. For a detached structure, we'll just go with like 800 square feet. At least 500K. I know that stick builders will quote you less, but by the time you're done with their unexpected price increases and overruns, we've had people who own construction companies and manage their own GCs still opt to use us to build ADUs because it comes in less expensive than production methods in stick built that they own and manage themselves. $500, $600 per square foot, all in, right? We're including permits, foundation, appliances, finishes. All of these things have to be included. $600 a square foot, not uncommon at all. Other prefab providers, so there's really two other kinds of prefab other than what we do, which is again manufactured home ADUs. So these other prefab will be either like panelized, which is sort of a blend between stick-built manual and sort of prefab. It's building panels and walls offsite in a factory and then stitching them together. And then other prefab would be like modular, which is building to state and local code instead of federal HUD building code. Generally just more expensive, more burdensome, more difficult to get through the permitting and building inspection process. These likely will be substantially less expensive in the $350K, $400K range all in, and then $450 a square foot. All of those are substantially less expensive than our $200 to $300K all in pricing, and $250, $300 per square foot all in. Obviously with the stick built, the big benefit for me is that you have complete flexibility and customization, and every single property is feasible, right? It doesn't matter if you have power lines or a really weird shape of a backyard. You can build a stick built ADU, but you'll be able to customize and be super flexible, but it's gonna be a lot more expensive. And you have less control over the process, right? You're dealing with 50 subcontractors, all of whom need margin, all of whom have scheduling conflicts. You're building, the analogy I like to use is building a Honda Accord over an 18-month period in your driveway. It makes no sense from a production standpoint. I can get in a soapbox for hours about the things that happened in the 40s and 70s to cripple factory-based construction, but it's a lot faster, it's a lot more controlled, there are no delays, you're in a weather, climate-controlled environment, machines are doing the hard work of measuring and cutting, things are faster and less expensive generally. That's sort of the trade-offs as I see them. Hopefully that's a helpful framework. The floor plans that we build, and we have a lot of flexibility, especially when compared to other prefab providers. everything from a 1-bedroom that's under 500 square feet up to a 3-bed, 1,200 square foot unit. You can go to our website, habitatadu.com/units, to see our units in more detail. This is a little bit more detail on some of our smaller 1-bedroom units, retailing all in for under 200K. 2-bedroom units. This is our most popular unit, 800 square feet, 2-bed unit. Retails for about 240K for our baseline sort of tier 1, very easy, simple sites for install. On the larger floor plans, which are quite popular with families or renters or tenants looking to bring in a lot of rental income, we can go up to 1,200 square feet in most jurisdictions, 3 bedrooms. Here are some renders of what our completed units look like. We like to say that, you know, the 1970s stigma of manufactured housing just is completely irrelevant these days, but there's a lot of advantages that you can accrue in going this route because the pricing is still so much lower. Example of one of our kitchens. Also want to highlight speed, and this is generally true for all prefab options compared to stick built. You just have less coordination and things that can go wrong because you're building with assembly line factory precision. Things go super fast and they're always on time and controlled, just machine-like precision. The other thing that's important to highlight with prefab is you're building the unit in a factory concurrently with the site work, the site prep, the foundation, the trenching. And normally those things have to happen in series, which means it's going to take 12 to 18 months. With prefab, because you can do the 2 things at the same time and then just tie them together at the end, you can get units done in 6, 7, 8 months very easily. And then as mentioned, we're super convenient. When you go with a prefab approach, there's just so many fewer things that can go wrong, less vendors that can have a delay, less materials that get warped or lost. Everything's just running like clockwork, sort of like an automobile factory. And as mentioned, we make everything super simple. You don't have to become a GC. I will also mention that with our unique HUD code manufactured home approach to ADUs, all of the headache normally associated with state and local building code from a permitting and inspection standpoint is removed, right? Title 24 does not apply. Solar panels are optional but not required, things like that. So how would you get started with us? Really the simplest thing to highlight is here. We do free, completely virtual, COVID-safe home assessments all day, every day. Send us an address. We can do a quick 30-minute call to do a sort of Google Earth virtual session on the site, assess it for feasibility, give a customer estimates on costs, whether we'd expect any increases because it's a particularly difficult site, things like that. For a customer that wants to take a deeper dive after that sort of free virtual assessment, we collect a $1,000 initial project assessment fee that is fully refundable at any time for any reason. That gets us started doing a physical on-site visit. We work up much more granular detailed quotes line by line on the construction and site work. We also will take the customer through a design session where you can pick out your model, all the finishes, the colors, the materials. And what you will get at the end of that is a very formal, very complete project proposal that is far more detailed and far more granular and far more certain than anything you can get going through a stick-built process, right? Because it's so predictable and we build in a factory, we know what it's going to cost up front. And for only $1,000 refundable, you have a ton of upfront certainty. And in fact, we guarantee, because we're the GC of record, all of our unit and construction costs during the period from proposal and contract through when permits are collected and received. If the price increases, you can get a full refund and backup. That's our process. Oh, sorry. And as mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this before actually, for agents, we've seen a fair amount of demand to become partners with us and become referral partners. As mentioned, I believe in the mission, so we're happy to give advice on all types of ADUs and even recommend competitors when it makes sense for customers. But we do have a referral program. You can visit habitatadu.com/referrals, get yourself signed up. You get a unique tracked link that you can send to clients or put in a monthly newsletter or post alongside educational material about ADUs on social media. For any customer who clicks your unique tracked link and signs up for an assessment, we have a note in our CRM that they came from you. We can provide you with content and collateral. And if they end up signing and funding escrow, you receive a $2,500 referral fee per customer to help reward you for doing great work for the community and for your customers. This is me here. Here's my contact information. I'll leave this screen up. You are welcome to contact me via email regarding specific projects or general questions. This is literally my personal cell phone number. You can contact me directly. And here's again the habitatadu.com/referrals page to get signed up as a referral partner with us. And we still have about 17 minutes, so I think I did pretty good on time. Jody, welcome back to the webinar.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been listening in, and it's very, very interesting.
Awesome. Well, I hope it was informative. I'm sure people...
There are a ton of questions.
Yeah,
so
well, hit me with some of the major themes, and I'll cover what I can.
Yep. So I think there's one question. Well, I like this one. Can you upgrade these? Like, make them more high-end, or are they, I don't want to use the term cookie cutter, but are they, here's what you get, or can you upgrade a countertop from Corian to granite and things like that?
Great question. So I'm assuming this is a habitat specific question. I'll just say generally, obviously there's a big range, and if you go with something stick built, you can build whatever you want, right? I've seen some. Actually, our founder, James, who just walked by, he's building a 1,200 square foot ADU on like a 500 square foot property in Santa Rosa. And that thing is very tricked out. It's super luxe. Habitat specifically, we are way more flexible than your average prefab provider. So if you look at for some other like modular prefab ADU builders, they really only have like 1 or 2 models or floor plans, and they're super locked in. Like you kind of get what you get. And if it doesn't work for you, too bad. We have 9 different floor plans ranging in size. And then within that, there's a lot of upgrades available on the unit. So we have actually downgrades available from our baseline if you really want the lowest possible cost and maybe you're renting the unit out and you just want to build the most affordable housing possible. We also have seen people upgrade. We can move walls, we can move windows, we can move doors, we can add a kitchen island, remove a kitchen island, upgrade to plank vinyl flooring, go to a higher end Corian countertop, add a stainless steel farmhouse sink, all sorts of flexibility in our design process, but it's still simple and constrained. So you don't need to pay 10 grand on an architect before you even get permits and before you even get bids from GCs. So you can kind of figure that all out up front and have a lot of certainty and control in your process.
So there's some questions about, size and things like that, about lot size requirements, which you kind of just touched upon. So there's one here about any requirement of a lot size. And do you have to have a certain amount of clearance, it looks like, all the way around it?
Let me pop back to the feasibility slide just so people can see that. Here. So state law has standardized this for the most part. There are still some things local cities can do, but they're usually not prohibitive or that burdensome. To build an attached ADU, obviously, you just need some room in the existing house, a basement, a room that you want to convert to a JDU. Garage conversion is very simple. You're just going to use the garage envelope, right? That's not something Habitat does, but it's an option for your customers. It's got to be stick built. For a detached ADU, whether it's stick built or prefab with Habitat, the standard setbacks, these are the maximums any city can impose. So 4 feet from the rear and side property lines. Actually, a safe number here is 10, but realistically, some cities go as low as 6. Distance from the primary home to the closest point on any detached structure, including like the eaves. Power lines are really an installation issue. That's not going to prevent a site from being possible. It just might prevent delivery or install of a prefab unit. Flat grading makes a unit less expensive, but isn't going to prohibit a unit from being possible. Similarly with the site prep, it will make it more expensive if it's difficult, but won't prohibit an ADU from being built. Delivery, some things I've seen, like creek setbacks are still a very real thing. and fire code is still a very real thing. But everything else that you're used to hearing about with ADUs doesn't really exist anymore. So there's no more like minimum like floor area coverage ratio. There's no more minimum size requirements. If you're building a 1 bedroom, you can build 800 square feet, period, and many cities will allow for more. If you're building a 2 bedroom, you can build 1,000 square feet, period, and many cities will allow for more, up to like 1,200 square feet. So all of the things that cities used to do to make it hard to build ADUs have gone away. Parking requirements, for the most part, have gone away. HOAs and their ability to say no, that's gone away. Floor area coverage ratio, minimum sizes, all, for the most part, have just gone away. Maybe I'll show this slide again as well, just so everyone can sort of lock that in.
There's two questions. Speaking of sizes and things like that, is there a maximum square footage where at some point it's not an ADU anymore? And this kind of goes into one of the other questions about at what point is it a modular home and not an ADU? Or
So
what's the difference?
yeah, I mean, some of that is like more art than science. So one thing that's interesting, just going back to this slide here. Okay, so if you have a primary residence already, that's your primary residence. And any new structure that's built, even if it's bigger than the primary, is an accessory structure if it's permitted under the ADU permitting laws. If you choose to not permit your structure under the ADU laws, it could become a duplex instead of an ADU, right? Where you now have two sort of standalone residences on one lot, and that would be treated like a duplex, but it would have to go through the typical discretionary, burdensome duplex permitting process. For the most part, most people don't have the space to build a secondary unit that's bigger than their primary. I have seen one interesting thing, like seems to happen in Sonoma County a lot, vacant land. So one of the things the new California laws allows for is you can take advantage of the ADU laws to build an ADU concurrently with a primary residence. You can't build an ADU before the primary residence, but you can build it concurrently as long as you apply for permits at the same time and get your certificate of occupancy at the same time. And there, if you try to be sneaky and like build the ADU first, they will instead just consider the ADU the primary residence, and you'll have to kind of flip-flop your plans and go through a more burdensome permitting process. I'm not entirely sure that that answered the question, but bottom line is that there's a fair amount of flexibility. California is trying to encourage more housing. So they will kind of, the state and a lot of these counties and cities will jump through hoops to help you get an ADU approved, even if it looks and feels differently than something you're used to.
And this I got two questions that I'll ask here, and we'll see where we are on time. So this may vary from county to county or even city to city, but is there an average cost for permits to build these?
Yeah, it does vary. One thing the state has done is sort of limited any exorbitant fees, so it's fairly predictable. To pull permits, we usually collect $5,000 before we start the permitting process, but usually the total permit package will end up costing more like 10K. Plus, the cities can still require additional reports. So let's say you need a soils engineer to do a geotech report. That's still a hard cost that a city can still require. So usually in our project proposals, we budget an allowance between 10 and 20K. And what's cool about our process at Habitat is that, you know, with an architect, you'd spend 15K, then submit, and then hire an engineer, and then submit your plans, and then maybe find out you have to make a bunch of changes all before bidding out and getting quotes on the construction. So there's not a lot of certainty up front in the process before you're spending money. With us, you really get a pretty rock solid, very certain quote in advance and have to spend minimal money before submitting permits to see if there are any changes.
So it kind of answers the question then of, are your specific for Habitat, are the plans already approved by the city, or is that kind of, like you said, that's kind of built into the process?
Well, the building plans are certainly not pre-approved. There are some cities that have pre-approved permit plans. San Jose, for example, has a pre-approved plan. program. We're going to be in that program. We have a great relationship with the city of San Jose and the mayor's office there. It takes a while to apply. But when you build a HUD code, you're effectively pre-approved nationwide. That's one of the major advantages of building to federal building code is these things are rubber stamped for installation anywhere, and there's not a whole lot the local building departments or the state can do to prevent our structures from going in. So not formally part of the San Jose pre-approved plan program, will be soon, but effectively pre-approved everywhere nationwide through federal HUD building code. The other thing I want to say about permit costs, by the way, as long as you're under 750 square feet, and we have multiple units at the 749 square foot range, a city cannot charge impact fees, period. And that was one of the ways cities used to try to prevent ADU development, is charging exorbitantly high impact fees.
And there's a question on here about, it says, I always thought building a home in a factory was a much better way to go. So I guess which goes back to the whole prefab thing.
Yeah.
Why do you think that hasn't taken off?
Oh man, I can get on a soapbox for hours on this. I'll just repeat the analogy of like, who would ever want their Toyota Camry to be built by a team of hungover craftsmen over 18 months in their driveway with missing parts and rain delays and what kind of precision are they really using when they're tightening a camshaft on the car? It's insane to me. But effectively what happened is in the 40s and then again in the 70s, manufactured housing was taking off, or any sort of prefab factory built housing was taking off. I think at one point it was 70% of all new homes constructed in America were prefab. And the very powerful construction lobbies and unions on sort of the stick-built side lobbied a number of different government organizations, HUD, local planning departments to get zoning changed, and it was also HUD at the time doing sort of the only loans were FHA loans. And they effectively said, like, we're all going to go out of business if you let factory housing continue like this. Put onerous requirements on it, ban it from certain zones, make it impossible to get financing, make it super expensive, do weird things with the marketing of these homes so that they're less appealing to consumers. So effectively, like, both in the 40s and the 70s, lobbyists kind of killed manufactured housing, took it from 70% of new home production down to 10% or 5%, which is a tragedy because it's less efficient. It's horrible for the economy. If you just think about what it does to the labor force and the ability to build new affordable housing quickly. Again, I could sort of wax poetic for a long time, but I'd like to think that manufactured housing has experienced a renaissance and a boom. People are realizing that these are now, like, the stigma kind of exists still, but these are extremely high quality homes built to the same quality bar as the modular home next door. The bar is high, the costs are less, the process is quicker and easier and more cost effective, and lenders are starting to get very aggressive in wanting to lend against these assets as well. So I'd like to think that we're all now ahead of the curve and can take advantage of an anachronistic stigma to get better quality housing built at a lower price as a result.
And kind of going off of that a little bit is there's a question about green resources. So, waterless tanks. Can you put solar on something like this? Like, what are some of those types of things?
So first of all, federal HUD building code is generally very green friendly and wants to do things in an energy efficient way and in a safe way that can support a house that needs to withstand hurricanes on the East Coast and earthquakes on the West Coast. And by the way, when HUD building code was built, it was the most stringent and onerous in the country in terms of safety and energy efficiency. Like, these are the same types of homes. We've got 2x6s in the walls. We've got thick insulation for energy efficiency. All of our homes come what we call solar ready. So the roofs are built ready to accommodate solar panels if you want to add them. They're structurally sound enough to support them. And in fact, there's even a conduit running through the middle wall that can bring power if you want to install it from a solar panel into the property. So it's something we care about. And it's something that I think is reflected in our designs, all of the various green elements and energy efficiency sort of capabilities that our homes come with, for sure.
And this is just because I'm gonna ask this question now because we've
Sure.
gotten through all of them. But what would you get requests for things like tiny homes? And do you guys, obviously in real estate, people watch HGTV. And a lot of, I think people's clients do, and then they come in and they're like, oh, could you build me a pop-up table, and can you do this? And do you guys get requests for those types of things?
We get a lot of requests. Tiny homes are interesting because it could be a primary, it could be an ADU. Like, to me, it just describes the size of the home. And one of our units is 426 square feet. I'll let the viewers decide whether they think that's tiny or not. We get a lot of requests for things that aren't part of our core focus, and sometimes we can accommodate them. So we actually get a fair amount of requests to build primary residences, which is not something we do, but have accommodated in a few occasions. We do get a lot of requests for units that are not like our baseline units, but like major modifications. Depending on how major, sometimes we have to say no to those things. Oftentimes we can accommodate. It's not that difficult for us to add 2 feet here or shave 3 feet there. I don't know if that answered your question. If there's a request out there that's possible, I'm sure we've gotten it. We get a lot of interesting ideas from homeowners and customers.
I can only imagine. I don't see any more questions coming in. I want to say thank you. This is super informative. We did record this. Can I send your slides out to everybody in PDF form?
Yeah, why not? Sure.
Okay. And then the only other question that I saw that somebody asked was, do you, and this may be part of the consultation process and she can maybe reach out, but do you guys have like handouts to help someone to explain